And screens are down. And welcome to this webcast this morning from London. It's the Exchange Hour webcast. I'm Kieran O'Kane. I'm your host for today. Today we have Andy too, who's the MD of OpenX and APAC. Andy, thank you for taking the time to be on our webcast today.
Thank you very much for inviting me and having me on.
So this is a great webcast ahead of us. We've got a big discussion about programmatic in the JPAC region, and we've done a report in conjunction with OpenX about the state of play in programmatic advertising in that region. So I just want to give a brief overview of this. This report goes out in the next 2 weeks. Via ExchangeWire. So I wanted to talk about the methodology quickly. We surveyed over 223 media professionals working across the region in Japan and the Asian Pacific region, and they vary from across the ecosystem from buyers to sellers. It's a wide and senior set of audience that we've surveyed. We'll go to the next slide, please. So the topics we explored in the report include factors driving increase in spend and where challenges remain in programmatic, patterns in adoption, particularly around ads.txt and header bidding by market, emerging channels that will accelerate growth in programmatic, which is very, very interesting. There's actually a couple of data points we're going to discuss here with Andy today about that. We'll just go to the next slide, please. So what research tells us? So top line stuff, numerous drivers fueling programmatic growth, next phase of header bidding, and digital out of home stealing the spotlight from CTV, which is really interesting. Considering the hype around CTV, it's a very interesting data point. And go to the next slide.
That's it.
Go to the next slide. Okay. I think we're finished.
So I think those are the three things we're supposed to talk about.
Anyway, we are going to have that report out in the next 2 weeks. So Andy is here with me today to talk about some of those particular data points and give us basically an overview of the programmatic market in APAC. Andy, how are you?
I'm actually good. A bit nervous. This is the first time I've actually done this kind of webinar. So how do I look?
You look fantastic.
This was my best side. Thank you.
Are you like orbiting the Earth there? I think you're up in a satellite there. Right?
I am definitely in the sky.
Are you isolating in a satellite above planet Earth? It's great.
That's all I wanted to be.
Let's dig into it. Some good stuff there. Let's start actually with some of the data points. I want to talk about the adoption of ads.txt and seller.json. Right, there is a perception of the Asian JPAC region, that publishers are not adopting ads.txt or sellers.json. Now, give us sort of an overview of what really is happening on the ground now, because it is a more complicated picture.
Well, I kind of look at it a couple of ways, right? So if you look at ads.txt or even JSON, right, those are actually mechanical ways that we're putting into place to address issues of fraud and also transparency as well as honesty within trading, right? And adopting it, of course, is everybody's choice. Now, this is an interesting finding from our survey where people are saying that they believe that they are not buying ads.txt, specifically ads.txt compliant inventory in programmatic across this region. And I highly dispute that for a couple of reasons. The first one is for any global SSP, and I'm not just talking about OpenX, but I'm talking about Rubicon and everybody else, PubMatic and so on. Any global SSP can safely say, and especially with OpenX, is that 100% of our direct advertisers are direct publishers are ads.txt compliant. So anybody who's buying into our exchange, who's buying onto a direct linked publisher, is buying ads.txt compliant, which is most of them. Now, in terms of the other side, which is actually prevalent here across the region, and not as much so maybe in the US, are ad networks.
Yes, now maybe everybody loves an ad network, Andy.
Everybody loves an ad network. Let's see. I think the first one was 1994, and I think it was called DoubleClick at the time. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to say is that on the ad network side, which is prevalent across this region, they do have, well, we do see adoption of the ads.txt being, I wouldn't say what I would call like systematically non-existent, but it's just harder for them to implement.
Yeah.
So to go back to your point, our surveys say that the advertisers feel that they're buying non-compliant inventory in this region. And I want to say that is not true in the sense of global exchanges like OpenX, especially OpenX. But on the other hand, it could be the fact that they may be buying onto local ad networks that are having a hard time implementing it across 1,000 publishers.
Are those ad networks direct buys, or are they programmatic generally? Are they IO mostly, or are they plugged into the programmatic ecosystem?
I think the ad network. So I think it's interesting to see over the last year is that there's a lot of ad networks trying to get into the programmatic side, right? Obviously, same reason, sell excess inventory, get automated, etc. But a lot of them are still very IO driven. So more direct to advertiser selling, right? So therefore, it doesn't have the mechanism or the automation mechanism of ads.txt within a DSP or an SSP.
But are the DSPs pushing you to get to make sure that these that the sites, the supply you have is ads.txt compliant? Are you getting that pushback from?
Absolutely.
Obviously, they're saying, "Look, Andy, we want to do business with you and your publishers, but you have to have compliance."
Absolutely, it is definitely a more of a joint effort on the demand and supply side, pushing everybody to go ads.txt and of course seller.json.
Right, excellent. And seller.json, that's the next evolution. Is that being adopted, or where is that in its sort of cycle?
I can't say it's 100% yet, but it is being pushed through.
Okay, interesting. So that's a good myth to kind of bust right away, that nobody's compliant in the APAC market.
And then, to be honest, I think it's just education. It's really just getting out there and explaining it. I think at a high level, it happened back in the day when I launched a trade desk into this region, right? Which is explaining how DSP truly work versus, funny enough, the ad networks. And it's just getting out there and having that education.
Yeah. One of the other interesting points in the report, which is actually very important, is there's no real clear leader in the managed header bidding space. There's nobody really standing out. Can we talk about that fragmentation and what that means? Because then we can lead into a question about maybe the adoption of Prebid, because obviously Prebid has been, the open source wrapper tool of choice for most of the industry, and how it's sort of built a fairly strong base in that market.
Sure. I think I'll start with the first statement of there's no strong leader. Overall, I hate to say this, and I hate to, but I have to state the obvious, and the truth is the fact that exchange bidding or open bidding by Google is by far the leader in header bidding solutions or container solutions, right? If you want to say anybody that has a DFP premium guarantee will have OB turned on, right? And then on top, and then in specific markets like Japan, Amazon is definitely up there in terms of containers, right? But with that said, if you're specifically talking about outside of Amazon and outside of Google, then you're right. There's no clear leader across multiple regions in terms of the existing managed service solutions, the managed solutions, header bidding solutions, although each region have their own little kind of leaders.
So obviously there's case in point. You might have isolated in Australia, isolated in Japan, isolated in Korea. There might be clear market leaders there.
Yes, exactly. And it really depends. And frankly speaking, a lot of it's just based on how long that company's been around, right? Southeast Asia, we know the OpenWrap leads, but so OpenWrap's also been around for about 7-8 years, right? And Australia, it's a toss-up between Rubicon Index and probably PubMatic, but they've been there for many years, right? So, but the main thing is if you're talking about a clear leader in what's called the managed solutions, there isn't one. But I can safely say that everybody and every publisher that wants one has one.
Right. And what about Prebid? I mean, obviously, it's been sort of the go-to now for a lot of the industry as a sort of a standard header technology. How has that sort of progressed in the region? And let's talk about that, because obviously it's open source, and it does require some technical ability to implement and to run. So just give us sort of like an idea, because the report goes into it, about how that's evolved in the region and where you see the future Prebid being in that region as well.
Well, I think if I look at a managed solution, I mean, I kind of look at it as training wheels, like header bidding containers on training wheels, right? A few years ago, when this actually kicked in, and a lot of publishers signed up for a container, and these containers were managed by the companies that actually built those containers, right? And it was an easy onboarding for a lot of publishers because easy revenue, basically. And they did it very quickly, and they signed up, and they got some money out of it, right? So it's like the training wheel, because the internal teams didn't really have to be very technical, and they were able to, and they were working with somebody who actually managed the whole service for them.
Yeah.
Right? Now, let's fast forward 4 years now. Let's say 4 years on, which is this year, as an example. I would look at Prebid as almost like riding a bike without training wheels now, right?
Yeah.
So, and I won't say it's, I cannot use the word lack of sophistication in anybody's tech teams, but it's just more of resources and time. But now, 4 years later, when everybody realized that header bidding is the place to be, but they also realized the downside of working with a managed service, which is the lack of transparency.
Yeah.
The idea behind a black box.
Yeah.
More importantly, in today's world, the lack of actually control, right? And so what's happened over the last year, sorry, to answer your question, last year is that once Prebid started getting more and more traction, that started looking interesting. When you're talking about 100% transparency, they control it. They do whatever the heck they want with it, and it's not training wheel. Sorry, Kieran.
No, that's fine. I just want to make a point in that control thing. Do you think that's something that publishers want more of? I mean, we've already seen the report from ISBA. I'm just segueing into this because it kind of connected this, that a lot of spend is going missing. Do you think that that level of control is motivating publishers to push this along? And remember, obviously, Google is the ultimate black box. Let's be honest here, right? They do not disclose their take rate on the buy side or the sell side, and they just do what they please, and they never really get slapped in the face, which I think is massively unfair and also like detrimental to publisher revenue. But I want to talk about that control factor. Are publishers really pushing this because they want to reclaim a lot of that black box sort of solution?
I think so. I think it's more of a balance, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, I had a really, this is a statement I won't attribute to anybody specific, but it's a buddy of mine in Thailand. And when I was on my kick about why are you working with Google because they're a black box and you don't know what they're doing, he came back to me and said, you know what? This black box gives me, I'm making this number up, but gives me $50,000 US a month on month. Do you know how many people that $50,000 pay for? So I think on one side, what he's trying to say is on a balance is that Google, being the black box, is something that he's willing to accept because he gets the revenue in.
Oh, right? I see. He gets that guaranteed revenue. Yeah, I mean, look, there's no argument that Google isn't a demand, water hose
driver,
AdWords and all the rest of it. But
what, on the other hand, he also mentioned that the reason why he's interested in the Prebid solutions is in terms of getting the control back, is then he can balance it out. Because at the end of the day, that still just represented a small part of his overall revenue. Right.
Yeah.
And what he believed that if he goes Prebid for the other side, right, he can increase the revenue, but in control of driving that other water hose or the fire hose that could be coming in from Prebid. Right?
Yeah. Which has a lot of demand from it. If you can plug in as many partners as you need. Correct.
Or control exactly what partners get what and how much he wants to charge for things.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Just sort of connecting with that. There was a good question sent in this week from Kurt Pena. He's the ad ops lead from Dazen Media in Japan, and he was asking, and this could be a good question because obviously you've worked in the region for a long time, and you know the markets pretty strongly.
Yep.
He was asking about the programmatic market in Japan compared to the UK and US and some more advanced marketing. he's worked in the UK for the last 9 years, but he's been working in Japan since September 2019, and he thinks that the Japanese market is quite behind Europe in many aspects, and he just wants you to kind of delve a little bit deeper into that and give your perspective.
Okay, I think I'll start with talking about the market, Japan as a whole. I think there's that is a Nima wrapped in a riddle, something like that.
Yeah, it's like I always compare Japan to the Crips and the Bloods. You either have to be friends with the PNC or the CCI guys, and if you go with one, you can't go with the other. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, OpenX entered Japan, partnered with CCI, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we would definitely experience that, and luckily did well with that. But going back to the point about the question, it's actually a solid question. Here's my point of view. Japan, like everywhere, like every market in Japan, it's interesting. In certain elements of Japan is super sophisticated, much more so than the Western markets.
Absolutely.
Right? So when it comes to programmatic, I think in Japan, and this actually is kind of their downfall to a certain extent, is that they got really, really, really into KPIs and results. Right? They started measuring everything down on last click attribution, right? They started measuring all the way down to what was it? Cost per view, per click, per viewability, OTR, whatever. But the point is they got really, really, really deep into the analytics and the results and performance driven, which led, if you flow that back across the value chain, it meant that they saw programmatic as a way to drive performance.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And up to this date, even now, and this is, the first time I launched a programmatic in Japan, campaign in Japan was 2012 or 13, right? It's still very much of a performance-driven campaign, right? That campaign I launched in 12 or 13 was actually for P&G with Rohan, and it was, funny enough, performance-driven, measured by click, right? But today, everywhere else in the world, when P&G or Unilever or any of the brand marketers are using programmatic, they're looking at it from a brand perspective, meaning higher CPM, meaning video, meaning viewability, meaning OTR as metrics versus CPC or CPA, right? Japan's still stuck on the CPC, CPA. Therefore, the media there is still very, I wouldn't say low cost, but low CPM, high performance.
Do you think they're going to move away? Do you think they're moving away from that performance aspect and be more kind of introduce brand metrics then?
I think they are. I think especially now that with the, people like Teads or Unruly in terms of the outstream video, and of course YouTube, which dominates from the in-stream video perspective.
Yeah.
That's getting very, very big in market, right? And especially the fact that a lot of publishers actually seeded their advertising and video delivery platform to YouTube, right? So you're talking about a lot of quote-unquote brand inventory becoming more available. And then, of course, you're also talking about a lot of the OTT and CTV stuff. So the answer is yes, that's growing. But I would say 80% of media transacted in Japan is still performance-driven. Sorry, in a programmatic way.
Yeah, okay. There's a good question here from Prebid before we move on to the next one. Actually, it comes from Jenny Yu. She's asked, what's your view on having exchange bidding and pre-bid /header working together? I think like a melange of
brilliant. That's actually wait, Jenny doesn't work for OpenX. I just want to be absolutely crystal clear because that teased me up. She does not. Because that actually teased me up for a point I forgot to make earlier, which is we actually did a case study with our client Compass,
of course,
in Asia, of course, about 4 or 5 months ago, and it clearly indicated that pre-bid combined with OB gave them an instant 49% increase in revenue.
Oh, interesting.
So it started with OB, turned on pre-bid, when it's instantly as in within a couple weeks, had a 49% in programmatic revenue and a 72% increase in CPMs.
Interesting.
So
those technologies can work in tandem with each other then, without affecting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I think the main thing is you'd if we cannot get away in this region, if you cannot get away from using Google, adding Prebid, where you fully control your destiny, definitely drives incremental revenue.
Right. I mean, obviously, nobody can turn Google off. That would be completely insane, given the fact that they've got so much demand for the open web. Well,
there's a lot of salaries.
Well, yeah, and but using Prebid in that instance, you can accelerate revenue as well because you're opening up to new demand sources.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things I was going to ask as well, because we talked about this initially, we were talking about the old ATS events back in the day, and one of the things that you talked about or was talked about was the repeated discussion at ATS, which is basically about CPM and data and audience, like that combination. And I know that was quite a long time ago, but do you think that we're talking about the same kind of thing now in the region as we were doing about 8 years ago?
This is actually the funny part, Kieran. You're right. So when I saw that finding in the survey, which is basically, again, the statement of programmatic, we love programmatic because it allows us to use audience data to drive efficiency and efficacy across our media buys, right? As a statement, I not only giggle, but I guffaw, because that takes us back to M Hotel 2012, when there was all of like 26 of us. 26, yeah. I think so, in a conference room, looking at each other going, let's talk programmatic.
Well, nobody was talking programmatic.
Nobody was talking about programmatic specifically, but I have to say, give credit where credit's due. I think there was a keynote by Reza when he launched Control Shift.
Yeah.
It's called Control Shift now. Back then it's called Ad Central. And he was talking about exactly those words, something along about audience, efficacy, and efficiency.
Yeah.
So going back but let's fast forward to 2020. And I think the reason why it's brought up is go back to my Japan point, is that it truly is still a performance driver, right? No matter where you go, no matter what format you're talking about, with exception probably video, right? The base efficiency and efficacy of programmatic still audience data tied with media equals efficiency equals effective performance.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's still. I guess that's one of the defining sort of USPs for programmatic in many ways, because you can argue that there is a performance element. Even video has a performance KPI. Well, it might be brand, but it's wrapped up in performance KPI. And I actually think it's interesting to say this, because I think that's one of the things that's going to probably stand out in the next decade or the next couple of years, because with a recession coming, and it is coming, that brands will probably flock to more sort of, advertising channels that have ROI attached to it.
Correct. This is another finding that we had in the survey was that programmatic is growing, right? Now, bear in mind, this survey was concluded right at the cusp of the current coronavirus situation.
Yeah.
But it still just shows that programmatic will grow. Now, going back to your point and going back to the statement, yes, I think it's going to go towards where it's still going to go back to a ROI specific KPI, especially during this current downtime.
Yeah. One of the more interesting sort of points raised in the report, and it's fascinating because we were having this debate on LinkedIn about a week ago, is the idea of connected TV. And I've made the argument that connected TV in the US is obviously a thing, but outside the US, it's problematic in the sense that outside of YouTube and the broadcasters, it's not really scalable. Netflix and Amazon don't have ads. In Asia, it's a bit different. You got iFlix, but even then, they were all struggling. Like I think that Singtel closed down their streaming solution there recently because it just didn't work or just was too costly. So it's interesting that the data points suggest that there's a bigger opportunity in digital out of home than CTV in the APAC region, which I found fascinating. And I just wanted to kind of talk to you about that, Andy, because actually, we kind of went back and forth in this one. And actually, a lot of people who engage in that conversation with LinkedIn actually were supporting what I was saying because they were seeing the same thing. Obviously, the trade desk didn't because they see things differently.
Jeff always sees things differently.
CTV will say, but I want to just touch on that because, like, it is an important point. And what do you think then? I mean, do you think that there is a bigger opportunity in digital out of home in that region than CTV?
Well, I look at short term versus long term, right? And I also look at hype versus operational feasibility. As kind of the four things, right? So I would say, yes, it's interesting. Our study pointed out that people are more interested in digital out of home than actually CTV, and they saw digital out of home carrying the programmatic banner earlier and stronger than CTV. So going back to that statement, I agree in the short term that digital out of home probably outpace and outscale CTV in the near future, right? And I mean, think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because digital out of home end of the day, for the most part, is a lot of it's video delivery, just across a different infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right. So, so for my personal opinion, I mean, if I just did some desktop research a couple of days ago, and it showed that in 2018, I think I think Magna was saying that, was the MPA? I think it was Magna saying that out of home in APAC is like a $13 billion market.
In the JPAC region, then. In
the JPAC region, right? It's 13 billion. Versus, let's say, even US and Europe is like in single figure billions, right? So it's bigger than US and Europe as a market for out of home. This is 2018, they said this. Yeah. And it was going to grow about 3% a year, right, since then. Yeah. So in terms of ease of conversion and operational feasibility of turning on digital out of home and make it programmatic, right? I know specifically companies like Asperus and those guys are coming out and make it happen, right? And it's just a matter of time of getting that scale. So going back to my second point, which is scale. So the operational feasibility of turning digital out of home on in this region, because there's money there, right, to be bought, to be made, right? And infrastructurally, it can be done a lot easier, which I think in markets like Australia, definitely, and potentially Japan, definitely, right? Then yes, digital out of home will outpace CTV in terms of scale. Yeah. Right. But in terms of long term, I mean, end of the day, Asia is still a TV market, right? TV region, right? I mean, what is it? Again, I read somewhere that total advertising globally is about $1 trillion, but of which half it is video or television. So $500 billion of advertising is on television. A lot of that's across the Asia Pacific region, right?
Well, that's still an analog system, though, Andy. Right? We're talking about you're talking when we're talking about CTV, we're talking about infrastructure that needs to be built, set-top boxes,
correct.
And the rest of it.
Well, correct. So, which is why going back to my four boxes, if you will, right? Operational feasibility, it is still in a development stage, right? So I know in China, like example, Yoyi is really partnering with TV manufacturers. Yeah. To be able to power ads on actually TVs, not even set-top boxes, and not even in streams, right? Yeah. And then going back to your point about Southeast Asia with what I call ad-funded streaming services, because remember, Netflix or Amazon is actually what I call streaming for the rich people, right? Which is not majority of the audience in Asia or Southeast Asia specifically, right? So I think they need to build out the infrastructure.
Video on demand, huh?
Exactly. And then of course the traditional broadcasters, or what I call the hybrid traditional broadcasters like True, right, in Thailand, who's looking to basically build out an infrastructure to CTV. So going back to the point, my argument would be CTV is hype today, but in the long term, once the infrastructure has been built, operational feasibility been addressed, right, could end up being one of the strongest formats in this region.
But do you think it's going to take a lot longer than people expect, type thing? It's going to be.
I would, well, especially with this COVID situation, I would suspect that it's going to take a lot longer than people think.
Yeah. But you just extend it out to there's a person who just asked about gaming and asked about what's the future of that. But just extending out that CTV narrative, right? Because at the minute, YouTube is getting most of the CTV budget in Asia and in Europe. Let's be honest.
Video,
right?
Yep.
If we were to extend it out to gaming, right, and look at YouTube. Essentially, it's a user-generated content hub, right? It's dog shit content. Let's be honest, right? If we call a spade, it is dog shit.
My 5-year-old debate with that.
Fair enough, but let's just call a spade, right?
Sure.
But if you were to say, why then is gaming, which is massively scaled in Asia, absolutely huge, not seen as a good avenue for some of that CTV budget, that connected TV in rewarded video? Just like the way you pay for an ad on YouTube, which is interrupting the viewer's experience, and that it is, like most TV advertising. Why is rewarded video not seen in the same bucket? And is that an opportunity then to scale, to take some of that money off the table?
Well, I think I know the Twitch folks definitely feel that that's an opportunity. I know there's a couple of startups, AmpFirst being one, is definitely targeting that. But I think the biggest problem still goes back to perception, right? So, I mean, I'm going to take my OpenX hat off for a second, just put on the fact that I've been doing this media stuff for a very freaking long time, where I have one time had to manage advertising for heavy.com, right? Yay. And also try to launch Massive, right? The first in-game advertising network into the region, and go back to the I would say the stereotype that went against us back then when we were trying to bring those type of brands out, which is the brand marketer does not want to put their ads targeting 18 to 24-year-old lads who drink Coke and eat pizza and play video games, right? Now, obviously, that is not the audience of gaming today, right, by any means. But I think there's a stigma of that needs to be addressed and educated, right? Yeah. So once you get over that, once you realize that, hey, it is not about 18 to 24-year-old male who's sitting there drinking 7-Up or Mountain Dew, playing video games at 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah.
And then you can start seeing the advertiser dollar going in that direction.
Yeah.
Especially now, right, where everybody, I mean, we're locked down in Singapore, and there's really not much we can do unless you play games.
Oh yeah.
Or watch TV.
Or run or eat.
Or really, run or eat.
It is the classic prison sentence. On that note, Andy, we've run out of time. I really, really appreciate your time, and we would definitely do this again if things continue. We can do this for another 18 months, but look, no vaccine in sight. Thank you again, and just to the viewers that this report is really, really a really interesting read and a good deep dive into what's really going on in the market, and that's done in association with OpenX, and it will be available to download in the next 2 weeks. And Andy, you're a superstar. You're looking great, and hope you're keeping safe and the family as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you for listening, guys.
Absolutely, and to all our viewers, the early birds here in Europe and the afternoon larks in Asia, thank you very much for joining. We'll see you next time on the Exchange Hour webcast.